Welcome to Boil the Frog Slowly, a radio program that goes where corporate media stops, where each week we ask the questions, are politics hazardous to your health? Are the decisions and incremental changes being made by government and industry creating health problems? What are they? Why don't you know about them? What can you do about it? Not only do we ask the questions, we furnish answers with unparalleled documentation, research, studies, and guests from around the globe with proof that unequivocally show that yes, politics are hazardous to your health, and you had better be informed before it's too late. Boil the Frog Slowly. A cute name? No. It's what's happening right now to you and me and the rest of the world as we placidly float in a slowly simmering pot of subtle changes. And those who hold the recipe to this agenda count on the fact that we won't notice the heat until we're sufficiently boiled, unable to resist. I'm Pat.
And I'm Sebastian.
And today we're stirring the pot. Thanks for joining us. Oh, Sebastian, this is one of our best days, yeah?
Oh yeah, this is exciting.
All right, let me tell you about our guest. He is Dr. Samuel Milham, a physician-epidemiologist specializing in public health. He has more than 100 scientific publications, many dealing with the health effects of electricity. He is also the first to alert the world about the dangerous link between occupational exposure to electromagnetic fields, electromagnetic pollution, and human disease. In his book, Dirty Electricity, Electrification, and the Diseases of Civilization, Dr. Milham warns that because of the recent proliferation of radio frequency radiation from cell phones and towers, terrestrial antennas, Wi-Fi and WiMAX systems, broadband internet over power lines, and personal electronic equipment, we may be facing a looming epidemic of morbidity and mortality. In the second edition, he explains how electrical exposure does its damage and how electricity is causing our current epidemics of asthma, diabetes, and obesity. And today, we want to delve into some of this. So it is with great pleasure and honor to welcome you to the show, Dr. Sam Milham.
Welcome, Sam.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. Now, Sam, you tell a story in your book that, for me, shines a light on how people of the world need to think beyond what they believe they know or are led to believe by conventional thought. And that was exemplified in your very simple telling of when your baby daughter became ill and you as a physician diagnosed her with a strep infection. But instead of leaving it at that, which is what most would have done, you inquired with your neighbors and found that the community was experiencing a milk-borne strep infection, which, as you say, was a clear example of a public health failure. And that's where we are today with the barrage of wireless microwave radiation and the ill effects that it causes. And most people are not looking beyond the wonderful conveniences to view and understand the real picture, but rather are accepting only what is easy to accept. So let's start out by asking, why is that? Why is it taking so long for the masses to understand what many have known for years and what you explain so well in your book, that we are in the middle of a public health failure?
Well, part of it comes from the fact that the etiologic agent is colorless, odorless, tasteless. You don't feel it. Except now, electrosensitives, they feel it. That's one thing, and then people they just can't believe that the stuff that's been around forever can be this bad. And let's face it, we're hooked on it. Everybody likes hot water, electric lights, and people are really hooked with their electronic gadgets and TVs and the rest of it. And it's let's face it, it's part and parcel of so-called civilization, but it's part and parcel of what's killing us. And people, I can tell you horror stories about. I've been to houses where I've determined what's causing the illness and problems in the house, and I come back later and I tell people what they should do. And I say, hey, look, if I were you, I'd do this, I'd do that. I come back, months later, and the same junk is still there. They still have their decked phones, won't give them up because they're so convenient, the cordless phones. But they kill people. And people, they just, look at the cigarettes. There's still people smoking them. They know they're lethal, but, they're hooked. I think we're hooked on this.
Exactly. We're addicted to it, to our technology, and people just don't want to give it up.
I know, and it's scary. I mean, I have problems in my own house. my wife bought a computer. She wanted wanted a wireless link to it. I said, no way. So, I don't want any ugly wires. She said, well, yeah, they are ugly, but what's better, ugly wires or getting cancer, And so I won out. I won that battle, but she still uses her handheld electronic junk, and
That's just amazing with all of the studies that are available. And Sam, you've got a wonderful recent papers page on your website on sammilham.com. One of them that I think is just really needs to be discussed, I'd love to hear you talk about it, is the one titled Historical Evidence That Electrification Caused the 20th Century Epidemic of Disease of Civilization.
Well, that's what made me ultimately write the book, and that puts it all together.
Yes.
I go into, in the book, I go into how I got that far, but there were two papers that led up to that. One was by Court Brown and Dahl. They did a study published, when I was before I got into this business, showing that the childhood leukemia peak was a fairly recent development. In other words, if you went back in mortality data, leukemia was fatal till we got these treatments. And in kids, it was hard to miss. You just did a blood stick or a finger prick, and you could make the diagnosis. So death records are a good source of data. Well, they showed that the major leukemia of childhood, that's common acute lymphoblastic leukemia, the one that happens between ages, say, 2 and 4, wasn't happening before electrification. They didn't make the connection, but I did. And the other thing that made me make the connection was when I saw a graph one night on the tube, on the computer, showing that the time trend of electrification in this country. People don't realize that this country is huge, and the big cities, Edison electrified New York in the late 1800s, first with DC, and then it went over to AC. But most of the big cities in the world by the turn of the century, 1900, had electricity. The farms in this country, the rural areas, didn't finally catch up with the urban areas until mid-50s, 1955, 56. So there you had half a century where you had two big populations in this country, both of which, were covered by death records. And one had electrical exposure, the the rural populations had varying levels, depending on how quick they were to electrify. Like in the 40s, I did that study that your comment on, that was based on 1930, 1940 U.S. deaths. I think in 1940, maybe 21% of rural residences in Mississippi had electricity, where 100% in California, essentially California and the Northeast states had it. If you look at the mortality differences, they were just astonishing. And going back to the leukemia business, the childhood leukemia age peak, you still don't see it in places without electricity right now in 2015. If you go to sub-Saharan Africa or places, rural areas in India, China, where they don't have electricity yet and are getting it, they don't show that peak. And, right away, I saw that it wasn't just the cancers; it was everything. People say, well, a lot of other things changed when electrification came along. Hey, that was the one technology that swept the planet. So every big city in the world had electricity by 1900. The other major technology was the internal combustion engine, and hell, they had trucks and tractors on farms long before electricity came, and they didn't have the leukemia or the other diseases until they got wired up, hooked up to the grid. It's just, the correlations are just amazing.
It's not just leukemia. You can really look at these epidemiology numbers for all kinds of other diseases. And page 78 of your book, you talk about the Old Order Amish in Jasper, Indiana, and how there's a doctor that's treating 800 Amish families there, and they don't have one single case of ADHD with their children. Now, come on, that says a lot.
No kidding. I saw that. And the other thing, he didn't see any fat Amish kids. And there's some good studies of asthma in kids. We got an epidemic in this country in asthma, and our kids. And the Amish kids don't get it. They work in greasy, dirty, dusty barns without electricity. It's cold. It's wet. No asthma. And my friend Stetzer, Dave Stetzer, who was my partner in crime, they cleaned up a school in Wisconsin over near Minnesota. And everybody in the school was sick, blah, blah, blah. What the principal had, quote, MS, which got cured once they cleaned the school up with filters. But the thing that struck me and him too was there were like 37 kids who used inhalers for exercise-induced asthma. Once the dirty electricity was gone, I think there were only 3 kids left who needed it. I mean, here, and the school here, right in the valley, one of the teachers was complaining that the kids were hyperactive, had ADHD-like symptoms. When you sit down, she couldn't teach them. We cleaned the class up, but with filters, just 5 filters in the outlets in that one classroom, a 4th grade classroom. And within an hour, the kids were perfectly normal. And the teacher was smarter than I was. She pulled the filters out, put them back in many times, and she showed that it just took about 45 minutes to an hour to change their behavior completely. The school was unusual, well, not so much unusual anymore, but out here in California, when they had the big recession, the school districts and the counties were broke. They leased their government property, school property, and firehouses and police stations to cell towers. They get like $1,200 a month for them. So the school had a cell tower like 50 feet right there on the school campus, and it was the cell tower, dirty electricity, that was causing this problem, because the cell tower was working perfectly fine, but the dirty electricity from the tower. You see, all transmitters, including cell towers, run on DC, direct current. You can't buy that from utilities. So they have a device in every one of them, in your computer, in every TV, in every transmitter, that's called a switching power supply. It's a transistorized gizmo that changes the AC to DC, so they can. Cell towers, they have batteries for backup power, so they have to charge those, and the DC is also used for the transmitter. Well, this device that does the switching from AC to DC chops up the current and puts dirty electricity, high-frequency transients, and harmonics back into the grid. Mm-hmm. Every cell tower has it. The other thing that's really killing me now is photovoltaic solar and wind. They generate DC, and to tie to the grid, they have to be AC, 60 cycles here, 50 in Europe. And they put out a terrible amount of this stuff. But getting back to the school, what happens is when you get exposed to this stuff, your body doesn't recognize what it is. It mounts a fight-flight response. It jacks up your adrenal cortical hormones, everything else. It happens on a chronic basis. Everything goes south. Your immune system goes south. That's why you get cancer, and that's why you get ADHD. And suicide's a big part of that too. I think that's why our troops have so much suicide, is because in Iraq and Afghanistan, where it's hot, they trucked in or barged in these air conditioners and generators to power them. And the generators were dirty. Almost all generators are dirty because the brushes wear out unless they're serviced regularly. They make this dirty electricity, which I think was exposing the troops and gave them this post-traumatic stress disorder. What's really interesting, people in the Navy and the Air Force don't have it. There's no high suicide rate in them at all. And people in Afghanistan and Iraq who it wasn't limited to people who were in combat or under stress. It was everybody.
When you talk about dirty electricity from these power converters from AC to DC, we're essentially talking about a high frequency that is emitted from the wires and penetrates our bodies, right? Is that how that works?
What happens is anytime you interrupt current, you make a spike. Like compact fluorescent lights do it, dimmer switches do it, well, all these switching power supplies do it. Another huge new source, not so new, but it's becoming more common, is there's a tendency to put these variable frequency drives on electric motors. In the old days, it was just on-off switch or high-low, but now they vary the frequency according to need, and the electronic devices that do that make a ton of this dirty electricity. Helping a couple of people driven out of their homes by submersible pumps, in the ground. You can't buy an air conditioner anymore unless you're knowledgeable about the problem. Every one of them's got a variable frequency drive on it. Mm-hmm. Our furnace went out a couple summers ago, and I was out on the deck when they were uncrating the replacement furnace, and I saw it was one of these with a variable speed drive fan. And I said, "Hey, take it back. Get me the old one." So they did. Where you can't clean this up. If the furnace is on, you got dirt. If it's off, it's clean.
Yes.
Same with solar. Thank God solar is only when the sun's up, because when the sun goes down, the dirt goes away. It's high frequency stuff. It's in the kilohertz range mostly, because the filters at Stetzer markets clean up between, say, 4 and 100 kilohertz. But there's a lot of problems in those frequencies, and I think the Russians were on to which frequencies cause which diseases, but of course that's never been published.
Well, I don't know. Barry Trower released about 8,300 military studies, and about 4,000 of them were given to Dr. Magda Havas, and I guess they're still working on scanning and making them available, but it is a science. I mean, they can literally tell what each frequency is going to do to your body, and that knowledge is out there, and it's just tragic that it's not being made available to the public.
Yeah, well, what's interesting out here, I've done a lot of solar. Most solar inverters, that's what they call them, is inverters, they put out 20 kilohertz. Some put out 25. Well, Stetzer remembers that the Russians told him that they ran 25 kilohertz into the embassy in Moscow to give those guys leukemia.
Yeah.
Right.
And I just got thinking of a nice Mexican restaurant. I measured that everybody's getting bathed in 25 kilohertz. I'm just wondering when they're going to get their disease.
Yep.
There's a engineer down in Brazil who he looked at just cancers now by distance of residents from cell towers. It showed that the closer you were to the cell tower, the higher your cancer rate. We're talking all cancer mortality. But what was interesting to me was she found it out to 500 meters from the tower. Well, hell, if the RF from the tower doesn't go that far. That's why they have lots of cell towers. I'm sure it's the dirty electricity. So I wrote to her and told her not just to look at cancer, but look at everything, and also to check the dirty electricity from the towers. But every firehouse in Riverside County where I spend my winters has got a cell tower on it. I measured half a dozen up, and they're all filthy, and none of it's good. The only stuff we evolved with stuff, the solar wind coming from space, the Schumann resonances, which are about at our brain waves, 10 hertz, 10 cycles a second, 8 to 10 cycles a second, and static electricity and lightning. But everything else is man-made, and we didn't evolve with any of that. But our bodies are in tune with the way the planet's been for forever. Mm-hmm. Like there's been some good studies showing that there was a study done about 30, 40 years ago of people attending a fair in Germany. They could track the Schumann resonances by day, get measurements of it. They showed that it predicted reaction time in people. Thousands of people who came into the fair, they did a quick reaction time test on them. And so, our bodies are in sync with that. And the other thing that the millions of smart meters are doing is they're jacking up the high frequency transits in the ground. And that's part of the problem is the utilities in this country. They got regs that say they can't use the earth as a primary return, but gee, they all do. To the tune of about 80% of all the electricity that's delivered to your house or business goes back to the substation, to the ground. You go out and look at your pole-mounted transformers and the center tap, the 3 taps on the side of it. The outside 2 are the hots. The center is the neutral. So your ground in the house is attached. The ground and your outlet plug is attached to the little green screw in your breaker box, which is the ground, attached to your ground rod, and also to the neutral. So basically, what's happened is at the poles, the utilities are dumping the neutral into the ground for return to the substation. So what it's done is, I go out and measure this all the time, and you're finding that the ground voltages and currents are just very, very high everywhere. There's no place that's clean anymore. And the dirty electricity couples capacitively to your body. I've got lots of emitters here that I experiment with, and I put EKG patches on my wrist, or my wrist and my ankle, and my wrist and my leg, and I expose myself to various and sundry emitters, and I find out what it does to my body in terms of how much current it's inducing in my body that wasn't there before. And it's amazing, and how pervasive it is. But let's face it, the microwaves didn't get invented till radar, World War II, the beginning of the late 30s, early 40s. And but the study that you're talking about that led to this book was based on data that predated any of this microwave stuff, and people were dropping like flies from 1900 on. Look at the Amish; they came over in 1700s, and they keep really good genealogy and mortality data on their people. Their life expectancy in 1900, well, from the time they came over, it was in excess of 75 years. In 1900, in electrified places, people were living, men were living 46 years, women 43 years, women 46 years. So they had 20 years of extra life on. And you look at Amish people today who don't have electricity, their cancer rates are half of what ours are. Their diabetes rates are 30 to 40% of what ours are. There's no ADHD in their kids. There's almost no autism in them. There's very little Alzheimer's, very little anything. But I got a statement in my book someplace saying that if we could somehow miraculously transfer the morbidity and mortality of the Amish to our population, the medical care and pharmaceutical and undertaking industries in this country would collapse.
That is such a huge statement, Sam.
Wow.
I saw that. I was going to bring that up later. That statement really makes an impact.
Well, let me. What's really sickening is the dirtiest places electrically I find. I've probably done more of this than anybody in the world, except maybe Stutzer and Magda Havas. They've done some of this too. Are schools and hospitals.
Yes.
How do you like the hospital connection there? Those places are filthy. They've got protocols in emergency rooms and in recovery rooms to treat people with insulin because their blood sugar goes up. Well, your blood sugar goes up anytime you get near these fields. And when I clean a house up, if there's diabetics in the house, I got to tell them, be real careful about your insulin requirements because they're going to change, and they do. And it's all tied together. But look at all the obesity killing people left and right. Amish don't have any fat. They have very, very little obesity. And I just I got a paper in that stack of papers I put online describing that. Anyway, that any place you look at the places in the world that have the fattest people, they're all little bitty islands in the Pacific and in the Atlantic and in places off grid. What do they have in common? They get their electricity from diesel generator sets, and when they need more electricity, they just add more diesel generators. Unfortunately, the dirty electricity adds up when you add more of those because you have to hook them up in parallel. You can't because the voltage has to stay the same. And that's how it is. And that's why coastal places up in Alaska have high suicide rates. I'm sure that's it. But anyway.
Well, Sam, you've actually written papers about this. You've written letters to agencies and officials, and from what I'm gathering out of your book, it looks like you're just being ignored. Is that? Does anybody pay attention?
Absolutely. I've written to the California Public Utility Commission. I sent them a copy of their own regs, saying, hey, look, I measured what's in the ground, and you guys are allowing them to put 80% of the returns into the ground. And, the dairy farmers found this out 30, 40 years ago. Yeah. What happened well, let's back up. What happened is when computers came in, that was the first big piece of electronic junk, computers and TVs that everybody got. They all make dirty electricity, and they put it back into the grid. It has to go back through the neutral. Well, what happened is high frequencies don't like to run in wires. It takes a bigger wire to carry high frequency than it does low frequency. So they started getting house fires and building fires because the wires weren't capable to carry the high frequencies as well as the low frequencies. So they changed the building codes to require more robust, thicker wires in the houses and buildings. But they didn't require the utility to beef up the lines that originally carried the neutrals back to the substations. And they should. Mm-hmm. They could do one thing in this country: get all the crap out of the ground and put it back into the...
So I've learned a lot about grounding, and our bodies are electrical bodies, and we need grounding, or else we retain excess charge, and it screws up our systems.
You can get rid of the charge just by standing on a piece of aluminum foil or touching, like here, I'm sitting here at the phone. If I reach over and touch the aluminum flashing on my sliding doors, the charge put into me by sitting next to the computer for the last 2 hours is discharged. The Russians make a meter called a B&E meter, and you just point it at your body from an inch away. It measures how much voltage and how much amperage and how much voltage charge you have in your body. And I've done this discharge experiment repeatedly, but there's an outfit called, what are they called? The guy's named Clint Ober. He wrote a book called About Grounding, and he sells a blanket that you're supposed to hook to the ground outlet at your outlet or to a rod, and then you sleep on this blanket. Well, hell, what happened is people started calling me, say, hey, I bought one of these blankets, and it makes me sick. I say, stop using it. If you use one of those blankets, what you're doing is you're essentially hooking your body up to the utilities neutral return line.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're doing. Because if you stick a ground rod in, right here, it's like I get 4 volts of dirty electricity in the ground right where I live.
Oh, that's terrible.
And places up in Palm Desert, about 10 miles away, where they're dense with mountain ranges, I got 12 volts of dirty electricity in the ground. A house where this woman had to leave her house in Orchard. The variable speed drive anytime on our water pump, anytime the pump came on, I measured the downline from her local transformer. She was getting 20 volts of crap in the ground there. And it was affecting people who worked in the orchard. It almost killed her pets, and she had to leave. She was living in a motel.
Sam, is it different in drier areas or more areas that are wet, like with a higher water table? Does that affect that ground at all?
I mean, I don't know. I notice sometimes out here in the desert when I'm trying to make ground measurements, I dump water on the probe. It does make it more conductive. But no matter where you are, the electricity that's delivered to your house is going to go back to the substation. It's either going to go back high or low, and it'll find the best path. If there's a pipe, it'll follow the pipe. If there's a railroad track, it'll go down the track. But it all goes back at the speed of light. But like I said, I've measured these grounding pads, and they basically stick what's in the ground into your body or what's in the neutral. If you use the house outlet, it's the same thing, because that's exactly the same waveform and intensity as was what I find out in the ground. Because they're all connected. The neutral on the power line and the ground wire at your outlet, they're connected electrically. In the book, I tell people in this day and age, a little AM radio turned on station will pick up most of the RF sources, pick up your TV if you have bad TV, or it'll pick up your computers, your laptop. Before I did the big school for La Quinta study, I was driving my truck I listened to this AM station I like, and anytime I drove down the road in front of the school, the station disappeared. I just got horrible static. In fact, I did it again yesterday. It's been 10 years since I studied that school. And the crap is still there. But anyway, that was a very good study because it showed that before I did that work, everybody was convinced that it was magnetic fields that were the agent. They're not. What's doing it is this high-frequency transient stuff. Mm-hmm. That's the etiologic agent for all these problems. And unfortunately, it happened the minute Edison spun his first generators on Pearl Street. He was making that stuff, even though it was a DC system. He was putting out these high spikes from commutator and brush arcing. He wrote this, I think I put it in a book or in some of my papers about, he tried dumping mercury into his generators to smooth out the arcing, but it just made everybody sick with mercury poisoning. And, even today, if you have big generators, every now and then they got to shut them down and machine the brushes so they fit against the commutator better, so you get less of this arcing. But they all have some. Some arcing, and arcing and sparking are major causes of this dirty electricity business. But in the hospitals, it's like your cell phone charger. That's got a switching power supply in it. All chargers are that way. All generators are that way. All electric motors are that way. Every electronic piece of junk we have around putting this stuff out. No place to hide anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, and that's what's...
EHS people are moving to West Virginia, where they have they forbid RF sources because they got these radio telescopes. But we're just going to have to get smarter about how we deliver electricity. And Europe's ahead of us in some ways. They don't dump the stuff into the ground like they do here. And it makes cows sick. It makes them stop giving up they don't milk and they die. They get sick. They get mastitis and just from the stuff in the ground. And the solar and wind farms, which is bad, miles away, the dairy farmers will tell you that the minute those things go online, their cows stop giving milk or get sick.
Right, and you have some huge wind farms right around Palm Springs.
I've measured them, and we got some huge solar generating plants. And I haven't written a paper on these, but I've written to the people who are permitting and citing them and saying, hey, what I've measured at these places is disastrous. They not only they make terrible electricity, you don't get a nice sine wave, you get this chopped up thing and with high harmonic distortion. I wrote to the IEEE 519 committee that they state the sorts of harmonic distortion that's allowed, and no response from them. Of course, the utilities that buy the stuff, it's got to be burning out their bearings and motors, and it's got to be hurting their transformers and their grid, and they don't respond either. Nobody wants to know about it. I do write letters to the editor that get published, but I don't think anybody reads them. Wow. So I wrote the book. I just wanted to warn people what's going on, but haven't been able to crack government or public health. That's really sad because the school business is just sickening. Because why should teachers have epidemics of cancer? They do. It's worldwide. It's not just here. But I could pick out the bad schools and we could fix them up with filters. But I've offered to filter some schools for free, and the lawyers for the school district say, no, don't do it because then you're admitting guilt. They could be sued. See.
Exactly.
That's it right there. Mm-hmm. Everybody's afraid of a lawsuit. And Sam, you're only talking about one aspect of the hazard at the schools with the dirty electricity, but now they've packed these schools full of Wi-Fi, multiple transmitters.
It's terrible. What's sad now is I've got some evidence that it's killing the kids too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Dumbing them down, but at the La Quinta school where the teachers had this cancer epidemic, I didn't even look for the cases. They started calling me. There were 3 or 4 young women who were to middle school, 3 years of exposure, and there were 3 or 4 cancers, thyroid cancers, and they were all girls. were in their young, early 20s. Milham, one of them didn't have enough money. And I told her to get it taken out or you're going to die, that kind of business. But it's that sort of stuff. But then there's a school down here, Malibu High School. The stuff in the LA paper I read, I recognized it really as a dirty electricity epidemic. People were sick in certain parts of the school and had all the symptoms that I recognized. So I wrote them. I wrote the school board. I wrote the principal. I wrote the superintendent of schools. I wrote the Parent Teachers Association. Some of the teachers who were complaining. Some of the parents. Nobody answered. Except I offered to come over at my own time, filter the 3 bedrooms for free with my filters, probably $1,000 worth of stuff, and they'd be well in the day, and they didn't have the courtesy of a response. The school here I tell about in the book was the cell tower, Vista Del Monte Elementary School, where the 12 or 13 teachers had breast cancer. There shouldn't have been more than 1 or 2. The kids were nuts with this ADHD. I offered to clean that school. I went to a school board meeting and said, hey, look, here's what's going on. We can fix it. We can fix it cheaply and easily. I'll be glad to do it for nothing. So they brought in Lika Kaifetz, UC, University of California professor, makes a lot more money than I ever did. And she told me I'd give a song and dance saying how harmless this stuff was. No problem, she said. So of course, they paid her well to tell her that, tell them that. But the public health authorities at the state, local, and federal level have really fallen down on the job here. I mean, this is just a horrible problem. Cell phones are bad. The way we distribute power is bad. All the new junk that's coming out, like these variable frequency drives, air conditioners, furnace fans, even lights. I mean, utilities give away compound fluorescent lights. They make people sick.
Mm-hmm. Sam, I'm going to read another excellent quote on page 76 out of your book. You say, the price we have paid for the convenience of electricity in morbidity and mortality since the early 1900s almost defies quantification.
Well, it does. I mean, all you had to do is take Amish mortality and morbidity rates and extrapolate them. We're talking hundreds, maybe millions of deaths that were prevented. Life expectancy. Just think of all the misery, all the pills people have to take. Just think of obesity. Oh my God. Well, whatever.
And now, we're on the subject of schools and what they're being exposed to. Well, you're looking at 2 separate types of horrible exposures. One, the dirty electricity, which we've had now and been dealing with and suffering from for over 100 years. And now they're introducing Wi-Fi. And it's
It's bad. But, wireless routers put out a ton of dirty electricity, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So they add to the dirty electricity problem. But kids get heart problems and all sorts of other problems from the Wi-Fi, and now they're letting kids use their wireless devices instead of books. And what's going to happen is, I'll predict right now, is what happens is when you clean a school up, absenteeism goes down, and test scores go up. What's going to happen is already they're starting to see brain deficits and intellectual deficits in kids. They've noticed this in South Korea. Some of those places are even ahead of us in terms of electrification in schools. And there's been some good stuff coming out showing that, hey, this is schools are where you're supposed to learn. This is just making the kids dumb.
Well, yeah.
This goes way back to a guy named John Ott wrote a book called Health and Light. And he also did some wonderful stuff in a Sarasota, Florida school, windowless school, okay? And he showed that he took movies of this. You can buy the videos made from the movies showing hyperactivity in kids in rooms where they had the original fluorescent lights, which were unfiltered and electrically very dirty. And then he didn't know what he was doing, but he did in a way. He put metal shields in front of the lights and grounded them. So he was just deterring the dirty electricity. And the clean rooms, the kids were fine. He moved kids back and forth between clean and dirty rooms, and has movies of them. Just like what I did at La Quinta School with that teacher. I didn't take movies, but she reported that that she couldn't believe the difference in these kids.
And that's thanks to an epidemiologist like yourself, on your own cognizance to make these efforts to show that, this data is available. It just needs to be looked at and analyzed. I'm sure there are schools right in everyone's neighborhood that are having these same problems. I'm sure teachers are getting sick all over the place.
Well, of course. I mean, the California Teachers Association has been counting cancers of teachers. A lot of teachers in a big state here for like 30 years almost. And I've written to them. I've written to the health department. I say, hey, look, we can identify the hot schools and clean them up. I get zero response from anybody. The California Teachers Association won't even respond to my letters, And the health department, they know better. I mean, they'll look into the study. The health department was involved. They made the measurements of the classrooms. And we had this black and white outcome, that the higher the dirty electricity level in the classroom, measured by them, the higher the cancer rate. It was just linear dose response, proved causation.
So if we have this right in front of our eyes, in your opinion, what's going on here? I mean, is this due to ignorance? Is it due to money? Or is there some other agenda out there?
I think most of it has to do with money and corruption. I think that, look at this UC, this Lika Kaifetz who came to testify. He testified in a lot of trials against these people. There's a bunch of them out there who take money and will say anything. I mean, and it's there's some people I used to respect and who did the original epidemiology, like Savitz and Albaum, and I mean they've been caught with their hands in a cookie jar. Savitz's study confirmed the Wertheimer-Leeper childhood cancer stuff, and now he says that it's all a fiction. And he's done some occupational studies that show the same thing. Like some ALS, I got a paper on that. I think it's in my CV on my website, showing that these electrical devices like TENS that do electrical stimulation to reduce pain, they cause ALS for sure. And probably your laptops on your lap do the same thing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And then you get all these people running around doing the ALS challenge and pouring the ice buckets over their head as if they're really making and raising some awareness.
The one that really bugs me is breast cancer. This pink stuff. Breast cancer, female breast cancer, is almost completely an EMF disease. And the real proof of it is that there's been 12, maybe 14 studies of male breast cancer got the same etiology. And those, since it's rare and easily, discernible, they've shown in those studies that the men, the cases have EMF exposures of one sort or another. Well, it's the same with radar. The cops who used radar, this one guy got cancer in his leg right where his radar gun was hot all the time. He used to sit on the front seat with nose pointed at his right thigh. He got it right there. Yeah. You can make localized. People are dedicated to firemen. It's RF that's killing them. It's not the dirt and the smoke. They don't have a lung cancer increase, which is exactly what you'd expect if you had an inhaled carcinogen. They get all these RF cancers. In the old days, the firehouse had a big transmitter on premises, and now they're wired for sound. They got stuff in their helmets, whatever. Now the firehouses all are dirty from the cell towers.
I was just going to say, every firehouse has a cell tower looming over it in addition.
Well, in California, that's the case for sure, and they're still slapping cell towers on schools, rent money. Oh boy.
And hospitals.
And hospitals are the worst places I found. And all the places I've looked at are hospitals. I got a cancer center here in town that pegs my 20,000 dirty electricity meter. Percy Cancer Center. I've talked to some of the nurses there, and they got the symptoms of the problems, but I've talked to emergency rooms in the same way. But, I've sat down to talk to these people. Hey, look, here's what I find. And they say, oh, sure, that's it. But you see the dollar signs ring up in their eyes. And, and same with the drug companies. You look at all the drugs that are targeted for neurotransmitters. Well, without the electricity, you wouldn't need any of those drugs. And like the drugs, 7% of kids take Ritalin, which is because phenylethylamine is
Sam, in your book on page 87, you mentioned the federal agency, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ASTDR.
Yeah.
Now, are they the federal agency that should be out looking out for our health and analyzing?
Yeah, they're the ones that look at clusters.
Mm-hmm.
My experience with them is they're completely inept. I mean, they just haven't got a clue. Well, you know, the fix is in. I think it comes in from up high. Like EPA used to have money and did some good studies, but they came out with but the big report they were going to do on this was squelched from up on high. You know, and I think corruption is about 80% of the problem. Yeah, the rest of it. I mean, if electricity stunk, I mean, we'd get a lot more done. I mean, but people don't feel that they just accept willy-nilly. Like, how about baby monitors and cribs? I mean, that ought to be a crime.
Absolute crime. Absolute crime.
And now they make cell phones for kids. They got cute little Mickey Mouse outfits with a little pocket for the kid to carry a cell phone in.
We need more people like you. I'm just curious. I'd like to pick your brain on that. Is there anything you can think of that would help bring epidemiology more to the forefront in protecting people? Because it's just being ignored by our government. How do we get...
Well, unfortunately, the fix has been in so bad that when I first started this, there was still some money around. The government, the military had contracts, the Navy and the Air Force had contracts where some of the stuff was being done. But now what's happened is all the money is going to, there's no federal money to support this kind of research. So after I'm in my 80s, I got a few more years, that's it. When I'm gone and Stetcher's gone, he's 60, he's got bad heart. Magda Havas is the other one doing this. She's had bypass surgery. So there's nobody else. We're done. It's done.
That's scary.
Wow.
Well, you know, that's why I wrote the book. I figure I have to leave a legacy.
Well, exactly.
You have.
Exactly.
People can, you know, anytime anybody asks for an interview or a lecture, I mean, I've done some videos. I don't know. I've just been desperate to try to get the word out. But, like, I wanted to send a copy of my book to Congress, but there's people in Congress who have filters in their office because they know about this problem. But I've written to them and asked them if I bought the books and sent them, if they'd use their mailing to get it into other Congress people's hands. No response, none at all. I've written the Gates Foundation. I've written all the big players who are dumping electronic gadgets into the third world and solar and pushing wind. I wonder, I'd like to sit down and talk to the governor. They drink, they take their pills.
Yeah, they just don't want to know. Exactly.
You know, the other thing that's scary is cars.
Yes, I was going to ask you about cars.
Most of the new cars.
Yep.
I was one of my rich friends took me for a ride in his Tesla. Oh my!
Oh
God.
my gosh!
That's like a portable electric chair.
I can imagine.
I can imagine.
And all these new cars with radar and video.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the government's looking at mandating this V2V technology where every car is going to be like a mobile cell tower, basically like a radar station, and emitting up to 300 yards in every direction. I mean, that's just disastrous.
I tried to look for a way to write Elon Musk, you know, the guy who was going into this electric car stuff and rockets and stuff. If you could just get one of these guys to understand, you know, or get one champion who's...
Yeah, but like you say, the bottom line, the pocketbook, the dollar. I mean, you know, why do they want to pay attention if it's going to mean reduced income for them?
Makes me sick when I see kids who are.
I understand.
I walk around seeing everybody's fat and unhealthy, and
yep.
I know it's man-made
and getting dumber by the minute. It's definitely dumbing people down.
Absolutely, and the shrinks love it. And the pharmaceutical people are selling all these psychoactive drugs because people are so wacko and people are killing themselves left and right that don't have to. And there ought to be a prize for whoever can come up with a clean inverter for solar and for wind. That'd be one huge help. Then you could then you could make clean electricity, and which would be a good start. I mean,
Yep.
but anyway.
Well, we're going to encourage all of our listeners to get a copy of your book, Dirty Electricity, Electrification and the Diseases of Civilization by Sam Milham. And you can get that at Amazon.
$12. Just go to Amazon and type in Dirty Electricity or type in Sam Milham and get it.
Exactly. And we'll send folks to your website, www.sammilham, M-I-L-H-A-M, sammilham.com.
Right.
Yay. Wow, what a pleasure to have you with us today. And hopefully folks will take this to heart sooner rather than later.
Well, it's been fun.
Thank you.
And we feel your urgency, Sam. We're desperate to get your knowledge out there, too. We need more like you.
Okay, nice talking to you.
Well, thank you for joining us on Boil the Frog Slowly Radio. Please come back next week. And for more information, go to the website, boilthefrogradio.com. And until next week, remember to practice safe phone.
Boil the frog slowly, you're a frog in a pot. Turn up the heat and things will get hot. Will you jump out or will you burn? Listen to the show and you will return to Boil the Frog Slowly.